But for me, what I knew was that if I jumped in wholeheartedly, I decided to give up alcohol, I decided to give up sugar, I decided to diet, I decided to exercise, my body would be in pain, in so much pain that I wouldn't continue on.
We believe in all the F words: faith, family, football, and fitness. Check us out on the Richard Neese podcast every Saturday morning on WKUL.
Please subscribe. Please help us out by growing the channel. We want to help good people get to a better place. So let's get to some of the hook, the tagline, the stuff that we really want to dig into. I had a great conversation with Ron Mosley Jr. We were talking about addiction. We were talking about sugar in particular, sugar and coffee and all those things that make our world go round. Dom, you want to tell the story about coffee that you were just kind of explaining?
The coffee with my wife being out of town?
That's right.
Okay. So, let me gather my thoughts real quick. My wife, we're both from Louisiana. My wife decided to go and visit her family for a week. And so, in case of those of you who don't know me, I have a touch of ADHD, just a minor little touch. Yeah, right. It's not observant at all with most people, sarcastic.
Never know.
Yeah, you would never know that. I just jump around all the time and switching gears. But people with ADHD gets fixations on things. While my wife was gone and the kids were out of the house, I decided that, hey, I'm just going to really pound the pavement, get to work. So I'm working all day on content on the computer, just going and going and going. And one day I look at my clock and it's like, oh, it's 2:00. I never even ate breakfast. So I had to hurry up, made me some real quick, and then just got back to work. I'm not a workaholic, but when I have a fixation on something,
sure,
it's there, and I'll be there till 1 a.m., 2 a.m. in the morning on that. So I started noticing I was feeling really, really poorly, and I started getting a headache. And I was like, man, what's going on? Why do I have this? So I'm taking Tylenol, taking Advil, and it just still wasn't there. And so finally, after 3 or 4 days, I was just talking to my wife, and I'm just like, I don't know what's going on. I just starting to feel bad. I got a terrible headache. And she's like, well, did you have coffee? And I'm like, oh my goodness. I went 3 days, didn't even bother making coffee. Right. And I got a bad headache from it all. And just shows you how much I depend on my wife to actually tell me, hey, Dominic, here's your food. Go and eat. So, and here's your coffee. And she just puts it right in front of me and start drinking.
Depending on why, depending on coffee, depending on these things, that most of us don't realize how dependent we are on so many things. Like I think about coffee, but I also think about guys that drink a little bit too much and they depend on a cold beer or a whiskey to help them relax and escape from the day that they had. I think about guys or girls that are addicted to fitness. So I've been in a state in my life where if I don't exercise, then my body starts rebelling against me, and I'm anxious and I can't sleep. And you think, well, who wants to do that? But once your body gets used to something like that, it's amazing how it starts craving it on a daily basis. And our bodies are such incredible things. Our minds are such incredible things. We can adapt to pretty well anything. So it makes me think about that. And I know a lot of you guys know we've been working on the fitness side. So 75 Hard has been something I've been working on with Andy Frisella's program. It's about 100 days now that I'm in. Of course, it's 75, so obviously I messed up somewhere in between. I forgot to take a picture. If you don't know about the 75 Hard program, you should definitely look it up. But it got me to thinking about, the conversation did, it got me to thinking about how I actually got to actually doing 75 Hard, which was starting to cut out things that were bad for me. So my thought process, my mindset was, I need to start cutting out drinking too much, drinking alcohol. I need to start cutting out sugar. I need to start cutting out all these things just to prepare to start the program. A lot of people would argue you just need to jump in with both feet. I would argue you should probably talk to your doctor about that in some cases. I mean, cutting yourself off from sugar and cutting yourself off from, depending on how much you drink alcohol, things like that, it could really cause a problem physically. And so you need to talk to your doctor on that side. We are by no means medical experts. But for me, what I knew was that if I jumped in wholeheartedly, I decided to give up alcohol, I decided to give up sugar, I decided to diet, I decided to exercise, my body would be in pain, in so much pain that I wouldn't continue on. So it was a gradual effect. And I talk about that a lot when I talk about the 4 disciplines of execution and bring in one wildly important goal, one wig into the whirlwind. It's the same thing on that side. Dominic, I know I've talked to you about that book before. Do you know what I'm talking about as far as a wildly important goal and also the whirlwind?
Refresh me on that right there. understand the concept. I think most people do. A wildly important goal, but what's whirlwind?
So the whirlwind is your day-to-day. So things that are probably not going to change. We had discussed this before when we were talking about building out our media calendar, our social media calendar. And you had the whirlwind of the day that you couldn't really affect, but you could bring in one episode of the real estate rundown. And you work on that for a month or for 2 months. And then it was just naturally part of your day. And then you bring in another thing. So in this case, you're removing certain things or you're adding in healthy eating or replacing, but there's still the same concept of bringing one small thing in and focusing and being very intentional on that so that you can grow overall. And a lot of people get so caught up on this big picture, the big items, and don't realize that incremental change, that 1% every day makes you 365% better by the end of the year. And so by doing this, I knew that my body would not work well with my workload as far as my professional world, as well as trying to get in shape, being a father, doing all these other things, if I tried to take on everything. And that's true today. I'll get into it a little bit later, but I've transitioned from doing 75 hard to doing 75 hard and weightlifting as of a couple of days ago. But I wasn't ready for that 6 months ago. I would have injured myself. I would have been done. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I mean, and I can relate a little bit. It's actually... in 2025 is going to be the 5-year anniversary of me actually taking my weight loss seriously when I ended up dropping the 60 pounds. It happened during COVID.
Sure.
But before I even started going on my diet, which was keto, I had given up sodas for a solid 6 months prior because I had an addiction to one particular brand of soda. So they may be a sponsor on the show, so I'm not going to go and say what that was. But I would probably drink 3 or 4 cans of it a day. Sure. You realize how much, and looking back, I'm like, dude, how much sugar I was intaking. No wonder why I couldn't lose weight. But that was the first step that I did was I actually replace soda, and then I just started replacing it with water. And one of the things that really helped out with this right here was I had a buddy of mine that I was working with, and he was almost a master chef. I mean, he studied food like it was a passion anyways. And every time we go to eat or whatever, and he would have sodas or whatever with him, but he would always get water. And one day I decided to ask him, I was like, man, why are you always drinking water? You know, he's like, man, I could taste my food. He's like, I put all this effort into cooking this, making this meal. He's like, why do I want to go and mess it up by bringing in a soda or something that's going to go and totally throw off the work I put in there?
Yeah.
After that, I was like, that's a true point. To this day, I will always order water with my food and I started understanding, hey, I actually prefer it with water now because I actually can taste my food a lot better. I'm not diluting my taste buds with other flavors that it's not could be complementary to the food.
Yeah, that's what I was going to go. There are some foods and drinks that we want to see go together. That's just kind of the nostalgia, which we'll get into.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, that makes perfect sense. I think that doing that is a great step. I think another step is having some sort of calculator, an app that logs your food. As basic as that is, what I like about the calculators now, the apps are, you don't have to know exactly what it is. You can say, like, I've got breakfast casserole. Well, they've got something that's going to put you pretty close to the macros on breakfast casserole. It doesn't have to be perfect. I'm not bodybuilding by any means, but it does give me a feel for, holy cow, I didn't realize that would have that much fat in it, or that would have that many carbs, or that has that much protein. I need to add that in my diet. And it's literally as quick as sending a text message to somebody, and maybe faster than that. So I like that. I like the water. I like tracking your macros or tracking your food. Even if you don't change anything or plan to change anything, you may unintentionally do it because you realize that something is not as good. Like, I think about sodas. If you start putting in a soda or a coffee, especially like from Starbucks or something like that, it's like, holy cow, that's that many calories. I didn't realize that. And it can throw off all of your metrics if you're trying to lose weight, gain weight, whatever that is. It can really hurt you on that side.
No, absolutely. And another thing, I know we're not really talking about weight loss in general, but for me, probably the biggest help that I had was I would set my scale up, and right in front of where I had my scale set up, I had one of those giant paper calendars right in front of it. And every morning at the same time, right when I wake up, have on the same schedule every day, I would have a pen just hanging down right there, look in the scale, write it down, and then it definitely kept me way more accountable because it was in a very obvious place. And because the calendar wasn't this little bitty calendar, this was one of those large wall calendars, probably 24 by 18 calendar right in front of it, so that you can actually physically see it every day. And so that helped me out a lot as far as like motivation and accountability for myself while looking at that. So if you had a slip up or whatever, and then the scale showed it, you're like, okay, well, look where I came from.
That's right.
It's like, I can get back on track. So it actually was an encouraging thing for me to actually go back and look at that. And I wish I would have saved my whole calendar at the end of when I was done. It would have been a nice memento to keep, to kind of see every day the tracking of it all. Right. But it was something that I highly recommend.
Where your focus goes, your energy flows, right?
Absolutely.
And if you don't track it, nothing. It's not going to improve. And that's what it comes down to. Whether that's lifting more weights, whether that's running a faster mile, whether that's losing weight, whether that's making more calls. If you don't track it, you're not going to see improvement. And if you
handling finances,
that's right. If you improve it, you're not going to know. So that's what it comes down to on the inside. You're just shooting from the hip and hoping that it's the best, hoping for the best. And that's not something that I like doing overall. If it's something that is important, if it's a KPI, we're going to track that overall. Similar concept. So the 75 Hard app that Andy Frisella has the ability to put notes at the bottom. So it's a checklist. So you go through and you got to do 2 workouts, one indoor or one outside, and then another one. You've got to make sure that you drink a gallon of water. You've got to make sure you take pictures. So you mark off those. But at the bottom, and I do the same thing every morning after I drink a gallon of water a day. So I take a leak, I drain it out, and I lose 4 pounds, and then I weigh myself the same way. And you start seeing that up and down, and it makes me do the same thing. I think, well, dang, I thought I ate more calories yesterday. I thought I really pigged out. What did I do that affected me in that way? I know there's going to be a lot of people out there that say, oh, the scale, non-scale victories and all this, and that's fine. Whatever works for you, you use that, and don't criticize something that works for somebody else. That's where I'm at. If it works for you to put that calendar up, do that. Well, just like with CRM systems, customer relationship management, the one that you use is the best one. Because you can have all the bells and whistles, you can have all the contacts and names, you can have the best fitness equipment, but if you don't do it, it doesn't work. So you got to make sure that you find what's going to work for you and start making incremental progress. And then once you get to that stage or that season that you're at that next part, then you say, okay, now I can add in X, Y, or Z, or now I need to cut out that, or now it's time to start tracking something else. And a good example of that was when I started 75 Hard. My diet was, I'm not getting a second helping, and I'm not drinking sweet tea, and I'm not drinking Coke. That was my diet. I ate pizza, I ate spaghetti, pasta, whatever, but I was still losing weight. I was exercising an hour and a half a day, and then I was not eating a second portion, and so it kept my calories down. That was my mindset. And then I got to the point where, hey, this is sustainable. Great, let's grab a little more. Let's take that wildly important goal, and let's do carnivore, or let's do paleo, or whatever that might be. And that actually took education. It took me learning about carnivore and paleo. So I wasn't even ready for that to begin with, even if I'd tried. So building out that time, building that buffer, and then what I like seeing are those small successes where it's like, dang, I kept this diet. Even though it's not crazy, it was better than what I was doing before. Now let's get better. Now let's grow. Now let's grow. Does that make sense, Tom?
Absolutely. Small wins replicated consistently. It's always going to make it the most amount of progress.
So that's what I love seeing. And a lot of folks get caught up on the other stuff. But what I try and do is get a little bit better every day. Which got me to the point, another one of the topics we're going to talk about, which is actually the weightlifting side. So I dropped weight from 75 Hard. I dropped about 30, 35 pounds, depending on where you actually started tracking it at, because this is my 3rd time this year, or last year, for 75 Hard. I went through 2 other iterations, but I dropped weight. I got to feeling better. I wanted to hit certain mile times. I wanted to get my cardio up before I started lifting again, because what I didn't want to do was be heavy, get in there and lift heavy weights and feel like I was strong because I had a lot of weight on. So I wanted to get fit, slim, and then I wanted to build back on that. A lot like what bodybuilders do and power lifters do, where they go through a bulking and then they go through a cut. Well, I did a cut first to get down to what my base weight is, or my fighting weight, which is about 165. I feel good there. I could probably be a little bit slimmer if I was truly fighting, but I feel good at that weight. And now I'm going to build back with extra protein, with weightlifting to sculpt different areas that I want to be stronger in. And that comes back to me being a man. I heard this on the Sip It and Rip It podcast with Zach Gordon and Nathan. And Nathan, I can't say your last name, so we're going to have to work on that. Sparazos, so Nathan, and they were talking about being a capable man. They were talking about being a dangerous man. What does that mean? It doesn't mean you go around and beat people up, but if push came to shove, without pulling a weapon. You don't have a gun, knife, something like that, which is a skill. Can I defend myself? Yes, I can defend myself. I was in the military, law enforcement, but I wasn't in the conditioning, or I didn't have the strength that I thought I should have in order to defend my child, my kids, my wife, my friends. I'm not the guy that I thought I was before. And so now how do I get back to that position where if Dominic got into a scrap and somebody started beating on him, could I step in and last more than 15 seconds? Does that make sense?
Absolutely, absolutely.
So being capable, being dangerous was important for me. I don't want to be a heavyweight power lifter like these guys. That's their thing, and I'm happy for them. But I do want to be capable. I also don't want to be a ultra marathoner, even though that appeals to me in the sense of the mental toughness. I think that the loss of the capacity to be dangerous offsets any gain that I would get from the mental toughness.
Right.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I guess what I would take from that is basically you want to be dangerous but not a threat.
No, I can see that. Yeah.
Yeah, that you don't want to be around where when your presence make people feel like, oh, you're people associate dangerous with insanity or craziness
Sure.
and stuff.
Capable.
Or that. But what you want to do is have that presence to where people around you respect the fact that basically it's like handling a loaded firearm.
That's
essentially.
That's
it's like it's dangerous, but you know that as long as you take care of it and you don't
That's a good point.
that you take care of it and you handle proper protocols and safeties, there's no immediate threat to anybody around you.
That's exactly right.
And something to kind of think about on that right there. I heard this years ago, and I haven't tested it out, and I don't ever intend to either, is in psychology. And I studied a lot of psychology in the last 2 to 3 years through whenever I was trying to go and figure out with my ADHD stuff.
Sure.
Is that in life that a woman who's in love with another man, that if she ever sees that man lose a physical fight, she will permanently lose respect for that person to a certain degree, that there's a level of lack of respect that she will have for that person regardless of the situation.
There's some value with King of the Jungle.
Yeah,
That makes sense.
And so you never want to be in a position, especially if you're trying to be head of the household and stuff like that, to where you're not physically ready to come. Again, I'm not saying go out and get in a fight and beat somebody up, but not be physically in a position to where you're just going to go and lay down, fall over, and just get knocked out or whatever. For that reason right there really kind of hit home with me. And I was like, shoot. I was like, wow, I'm never going to get in a fight.
Sure.
I was like, I never, especially from my wife, like, get out. and then, just say that I won. And after I'm bloodied and bruised, I'm good.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So I think the big thing on that for me is being capable. And then I don't want to get to a point where I'm not an extreme guy in the sense that I don't want to be so big and strong that I can't move and be functional, and it affects me because some of those guys they take certain steroids and things like that shorten their life. And their argument, and it's their life, they can do what they want, but their argument is that they would rather have a more capable and full life. I don't want to shorten my life, but I also know that a lot of people end up in a nursing home for the last 5-10 years and have no quality of life. But then you can start arguing about our current system as far as familial and the value that your elders have now versus 100 years ago. That may be a good topic for us to talk about. Maybe get Captain Ed Potter in here to talk about that. I've got a different perspective on the value that our elderly bring, and I really hate seeing in America in particular how we stick guys in a nursing home, papa, grandpa, and then you end up in a position where you lose a lot of experience and a lot of teaching from the old ways that should be passed down. What I see is kind of mom and dad are out in the field, out working, out doing things, and grandpa and grandma have an opportunity to teach the grandchildren about the way of the world as it was before, and that builds their character, as opposed to having kids that are on YouTube all the time, which we want you to watch our YouTube channel, of course, but on YouTube, on video games, they're missing out on some of the old ways and things that should be passed down. That's another rant, a different tangent.
But yeah, no, we definitely lost. And I honestly, I blame the Industrial Revolution for a lot of that going out the window.
I can see that.
That happened where that generational families, the Waltons, for instance. I don't know how many y'all familiar with the Waltons, where you would have the parents, the kids, and the grandparents all living in the same household. And the grandfather, the Waltons, actually was my favorite character because he was mischievous but he imparted a lot of down-to-earth wisdom at the same time.
Absolutely.
But was very, very, he wasn't like just some sort of priest, sitting in the corner like, oh, respect him or whatever. He liked to mess around and have fun with the kids and stuff. But whenever he spoke, true wisdom came out of his mouth. And it was something that I always really, really respected about that show. In fact, is probably whenever I was rewatching it and kind of going through the seasons of it all, have it all on DVD. There's a point where he dies in between seasons, and that episode always just hits me so hard because you really feel the loss of a life, and that's the kind of impact grandparents should have, or parents of adult children should have. Is that you feel the impact of their loss because of all that they meant to the family as a whole. Whereas in the nowadays, and then in this industrial revolution, post-industrial revolution age, parents are viewed as an inconvenience, as like, well, and even the parents buy into this, the grandparents buy into this. They're like, well, I don't want to be a burden to them, know? And again, it sounds noble and stuff, but at the same time, it's actually selfish that you really need to be helping out the next generation of things to impart the lessons that you've learned to help the next generations not make the mistakes that you've made down the road. And honestly, even if you are burdened to your children, your grandchildren, good. They burdened you. You burdened for them. Point. You need to be inconvenienced for their sake, because they have to also understand the respect of taking care of somebody in their elderly age, so that they can actually have a big appreciation for the grand scheme of life.
Yep. So this is a big topic for me. Some folks may know, some may not, that my wife's grandparents live with us. So our kids have the ability to spend time with great grandpa and great grandma. The challenge of that is, and John Eldridge has a book, Wild at Heart, that discusses some of this. And if you're ever around me, you'll know that seasonality is something I talk about a lot. We have different seasons in our life. We have different seasons in our careers. And understanding that is as important as the work itself, in my opinion. We start looking at, John Eldridge talks about different stages of a man's life, and starting from boyhood, and the boyhood turns into a cowboy turns into a warrior turns into a lover turns into a king turns into a sage. Well, one of the challenges is accepting your role. It's hard for the king to turn into the sage, because the king wants to continue to lead and rule. You also have issues where the warrior has to become the king, which means, and I have an issue with this, especially in business, because a lot of times I want to go out and I want to kill, for lack of a better word. I want to go out and I want to find business and generate things. But the best use of my time and what my team needs is to be the king. Or to be the sage, whatever that is. But for me in particular, be the king, and to lead and to put pieces in place and to use my experience and use the clout that I have for different things, instead of going out and roughing up somebody or going out and finding the deal. It's training these guys. And we had this happen actually with my wife recently. She is the CEO of Into Coffee Enterprises, which is, we own a couple scooters franchises. And the challenge is that when the king's not there, if you didn't do what you were supposed to do as the king or queen in this case, which is train up your people, at that point, when they step out, there's nobody to lead. You didn't train the way you needed to, because all you did was the actual job itself instead of passing down the wisdom. And I think you see that inside of these homes. Where are we on time? 23 minutes. You see that inside these homes that have multiple generations. You have the sage grandpa that is still trying to be the leader. And there has to be mutual respect, but there has to be a transition. I'm sure you've seen that in your
firsthand.
You've seen that firsthand with a personal family, but also with relatives and things like that. And it's hard because as a sage, and I haven't been there, but as a sage, it appears that it's really hard to let that piece go and be a counselor to help counsel, just like you were talking about with Grandpa, right? So Grandpa is telling these, whether it's funny little anecdotes to teach you something, or I think about Esau's fables, things like that, or it's hard truths that only the king and the sage can have. Most people don't think about that. They think, I've got to be the king, or I've got to be the warrior. A lot of young men are afraid to step into the role as a king because they enjoy the warrior a lot, but also because they don't think that they can be, that imposter syndrome, like we talked about a good bit. I know I'm kind of rambling on this. We need to have that as a full episode. I need to reread Wild at Heart and maybe The Way of the Wild Heart.
Yeah, no, that.
And then we'll double back and go over that maybe in February. What do you think about that?
Absolutely. Actually, I was talking to, I have one of my employees that work with me in the office, and we brought up that conversation. We were just talking about, and he's a younger guy, and so we were just talking about roles parents play in somebody's life, and so
Sure.
and then I started talking about it, and I was like, you know what, I was like, I had the audiobook while all that hard. I said, while we're working, I was like, I'm just gonna start playing that in the background. Now I got to stop, and we haven't got started on it yet because we're in the middle of training and stuff. So I don't want them to start sitting down and start talking. Oh, my daddy didn't love me. Having conversations type of thing, and you don't really have that. And I like we like to make poke fun at that because it does two things. It exposes yourself on what you want to be. And then it also looks at the things that you lacked growing up that was not imparted to you.
That's right.
And you have to not look at it that way. You have
More
to
specifically understanding the wounds, and most of the time that were caused by a father figure.
Right. And it's a joke I like to go and tell different people whenever they tell me different advice on raising my children and stuff. I always tell them, hey, look, I'll wound my kids the way I want to, you know? Right. That's my job. It's like, I get to wound the kids the way that I want to. It's my job now. It's like.
I was talking with Zach Gordon, who is doing the training for me. He's one of the hosts on the Sip and Rip It podcast. And this is very true. And I don't even know that we're going to get into most of the topics, but we'll kind of end on this. Zach talks about a lot of people use physical training as a therapy, and actually their physical trainer as a therapist. So they actually go in and they talk to them, that they, whatever's going on in their world, they think that getting stronger is going to fix that. Truly, it's just decompressing and then finding something to replace that overall. So, I mean, we're going to hit some more of this stuff up on the other side. We're coming to the end of the radio show as far as our timeline goes. Dominic, it's been a pretty deep episode today. Not so much college football, but more about life, addiction, things like that. I really appreciate all of you guys listening in. Make sure you tune in on YouTube. You can check us out and watch the rest of this episode. We'll probably go another 20 or 30 minutes. I've got some meetings that are coming up. But we're going to discuss some more about Wild at Heart. We're going to talk a little bit more about the gym, a tribe of mentors with Tim Ferriss. Is there anything you wanted to tease on this part?
I'd like to go talk about mental health and stuff, and we kind of touched on that a little bit. So this time of the year, I feel is very important.
Absolutely. I think it all ties in. So make sure you check us out on YouTube. Thanks for tuning in on WKUL today. Make sure you sponsor us. If you guys watch us, you can see I've got my 10X shirt on, my North Alabama Storage shirt on. We're always trying to grow small businesses. So if you want to reach out, you need some construction work done in North Alabama, we'd be happy to help you. Give me a call or send me a DM. We'd appreciate that. I think that's all I've got. So our goal with the Richard Neese podcast is to help good people get to a better place. We want to add value for your life. So please keep tuning in. If we bring you some value, please share, please subscribe. Try and help us grow our channel. We hope you guys have a good day.
Stay warm.
Hey everybody, Richard Neese with the Richard Neese podcast. We're back for the second part of I guess it's the second part of the YouTube. There's no second part of WKOL. So that piece. So we want to hit all sorts of platforms. That's why we do it in this format. We've had a great relationship with Ron Mosley Jr. and Ron Mosley and Coleman at WKOL. So we wanted to have our message put out on that broadcast, because a lot of people that don't listen to YouTube, they don't listen to podcasts on Spotify and things like that. So this may be a way for us to help them in their lives, and then who knows, we may convert them into doing something like that. We left off talking about John Eldridge, right? And Wild at Heart
and Way of the Wild Heart. And just a quick recommendation is, so if you see the two books out there and you decide, hey, let's give it a shot, absolutely, Wild at Heart is a prequel to Way of the Wild Heart.
That's right.
I mean, it sets the foundation for what Way of the Wild Heart gets into. Now, overall, I do feel like Way of the Wild Heart is a more impactful book as far as like the overall messaging, and it actually outlines basically some action points that you can do in that right there. But Wild at Heart sets it up so well and so perfectly to where you kind of build that background story, that background understanding of it all before you get into it. Actually, when we first started listening to, probably one of the most eventful years for me was whenever I was introduced to that book. So it was a year that I had a pretty significant accident in my life. I was in a construction accident, had a compound fracture on my arm, fell down about 12 feet on the concrete, tried to stop myself. And when I say it shattered my arm, it shattered my arm. And so it's never been the same. So I'm in recovery. And during recovery, there's this old, this program my dad used to do, the Ultra movement. And so I got invited to do the Ultra retreat. And it was one of the single most impactful experiences I've had in my life, in my in my Catholic life. Something I can't talk about because you're not sworn to secrecy, but there's so much in there that's so meaningful you don't want to talk about. You kind of want to keep it to yourself. But then right after that, I went and so this was like 2007, 2008. Right after that, I went and started listening to the audiobook Wild at Heart. And then that hit me again. I was like, oh my gosh, right after that. And actually, he's kind of formed a little organization, a little group of about 7 or 8 guys, young guys, some older men, where we would put it on audio. We had an audio book. It was almost like an outdoor book club. And then it would be at night, we'd light a fire and then just have it play and then have discussions in between.
Yeah.
So we did that probably, met once or twice a week. And we went through the entire books, Wild at Heart, Way of the Wild Heart. And so it was a good experience. I was there with my 2 brothers and we were listening to it. And then we all we would all talk about, our own issues. Even though we were brothers, we still had
group counseling.
We still had some separate issues on our own. But then right after that, I met my wife. So that year was like, for me, I felt like there was a year that I transitioned from a boy to a man, just because of everything that happened, just the amount of maturity. It was almost like, in my way, I feel like that God was setting me up in order to, my wife didn't see this immature idiot. She saw an idiot who was less immature, but had a lot more foundational things moving forward, to where I was now more mentally prepared to actually take on a relationship that could be serious enough to get married.
What I'll say is about those 2 books, and it's been so long since I've read them, they both kind of run together to me. I don't remember which one is in which, what content is there. But I will say that Wild at Heart should be read by women too. This isn't just a guys club thing. I think that it'll help you have a better understanding of your spouse or future spouse, understand what their
and your sons
and your sons.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, what that did was I read it probably right when I had Thomas, my only son, and it made me think about some of the things that I had going on, daddy issues, things like that. And then the flip side, just like you were talking about, I know I want to be in charge of how I wound my children. So it makes me think, like, when I want to fly off the handle, how does this impact him? Not just in this moment, but also discipline-wise. But then long-term, what kind of man does that create? And is there a better way of doing that? That's what I keep coming back to. And having 4 kids, girls, I have 3 girls, and it's a little bit different. I have a different perspective on that. But with a boy in particular, most guys he's a boy, he's tough, he's this, he's that. I remember being soft-hearted and tender-hearted, and then I almost remember like the year that transitioned, when I was no longer tender-hearted. And a lot of that had to do with my relationship with my dad and with father figures in general. My mom's been married several times, and so there was constant changing, and there was different perspectives and different nurturing or lack of nurturing that was going on. And this wasn't meant to be a therapy session for you guys, but we just want to give you a good feel. This is a great book to read.
Oh, 100%.
It doesn't matter if you're a commando. It doesn't matter if you're a psychiatrist. I mean, it's a great book for you to have a better understanding. You're not going to agree with everything in there, but I think you'll see yourself in this book as a man. You'll probably see your son or your spouse in this book as a woman if you decide to read that. I think it's a great opportunity to grow as a person, whether it's for yourself or for somebody else. And it lines right up with what we're talking about as far as mental health. Some of the things you wanted to hit on as far as Christmas goes. I started the conversation kind of talking about Zach, and he was talking about being a therapist for his clients. It's the same thing with a lot of industries, but especially in that, because people try and bury themselves, whether that's in an insecurity or they try to have a release or an escape, whether that's through the bottle. But a lot of times people try to do that through exercise, and I think that's a pretty good substitute overall for escapism. It allows you to get away. I do think it can be dangerous and cover things up too, You can be completely obsessed with exercise and the way that you look, but with the right dosage, I think it's a good thing.
I think that any form of escapism that's taken into where it distracts you from your daily responsibilities and your daily relationships is not healthy.
It's a valid point.
So it doesn't necessarily now on the flip side, I also think escapism is necessary for a healthy well-being and a healthy mentality, because if we get caught up in life and the day-to-day stuff all the time and not have that ability to kind of let it all go and let it all loose, it can create a lot of mental anxiety, a lot of mental instability without having that kind of release. And as long as, to me, I always look at it like, yeah, you definitely want to go and stay away from the vices of escapism, and anything taken to excess can be labeled a vice. I guess.
That's what I was about to go.
Yeah, but
if you meditate for 2 days at a time, that could be a vice, especially if you have a family that needs to be fed and you're not taking care of.
Absolutely. And if you're using, and again, hot take on this one, and this probably shouldn't be, but if you're using your faith and your religion as a way of and not taking care of your family, well, you're not doing your first responsibility, which is the responsibility of taking care of your family first, along with your faith. And I've seen that happen many times where you go to church. And again, I'm not judging anybody for this, but my this family that we knew my dad would always talk about is like, this man would be in church and he would be have his hands folded and just as pious as can be, and still a good man to this day. But he would have quite a few kids, and they'd be jumping around, making some noise inside of church, being disruptive in church. But he was too busy, but he was he was focused on prayer. Now years later, they're all grown. The kids are probably my age, and they're not in the they're not following the faith. They're going on their own ways. They delved into some heavy vices, let's put it that way. And then this man would talk to my dad years later, and he's like, I don't know what I did wrong. And my dad's just kind of quiet, like, well,
take your blinders.
Yeah. It starts.
The little things matter.
Yeah, it starts as like in church and public. If you're not getting them, you're too busy being holy that you're not actually taking care of the things God has given you. That's in your responsibility to take care of. That you should have been taking care of that first. So it's kind of a weird dynamic on that right there when you think about it in that way, that even something as religion or having a prayerful life can be used in a way if it's done in excess to where you neglect responsibility.
I can definitely see your perspective on that, and I'm on the other extreme of that. Me and my wife, our kids are very well behaved and well mannered in public for sure, and they're good kids at home too. But I also think that if the whole time all you're doing is scolding your kids and not
100%. No, I'm not.
Yeah. I mean, and I've seen both sides of that. I've seen what you're talking about. I've also seen people that instead of actually trying to be involved in the service, all they're doing is, shh, don't move, don't do this. I mean, kids are going to move around, and I think you know that. How many siblings and nephews and nieces do you have at this point? I probably can't even count them all. You start looking at that and trying to keep. I think about our school system, trying to keep a boy still all day long and learn something. Yeah. It's just not going to happen. No. But I think that you set certain boundaries on that. And then once you get outside that boundaries, obviously you got to do something to keep your kids in line and let them know that this is a reverent place and you should be respecting that. So I agree. I do think it's easy to take something that's holy like that. I've seen that happen with church ladies and church men where all they do is give to the church, and then they leave their family hanging when they're in need. I've seen that happen many times. I think anything that you do, I think that Zach and Nathan talk about this all the time. It's the dosage that is dangerous. It's the dosage that's poisonous. So if all you do is weight lift all day long, you avoid your family, avoid everything else, obviously that's going to be dangerous. If it's prayer, if it's reading, you can be disrespectful. And
don't get me wrong, I don't think that that's an epidemic of people prayerfully neglecting their family.
That's right.
So I'm not definitely not saying that
he's making a stand now.
Yeah. That's not that's an extreme example from the other side of it all. That no matter what it is, even if it's prayer, or that you should go and have take care of responsibilities first, and then still have that ability to allow that escapism when it's necessary, when it's important, but don't let it consume your life, to take it over. You know, a lot of us, and I'm guilty of being a weekend warrior myself,
Sure.
On stuff, and get a little too obsessed about things. But I have to always bring myself back down and being like, hey, look, you know, these are the things that I have to do, both in my work and with my family. And someone works from home, so I'm around my kids a lot. So I see a lot of the little things day to day that I can kind of help, either help or hurt, depending on my wife's definition of what's helping and what's not.
So, Dom, I know you wanted to in particular talk about the Christmas season and kind of the commercialization, and then what that does mental health wise, what you've seen overall. I never really had a big Christmas at home. Like, we would bounce from 3 or 4 different locations between dad, stepdad, mom, this, that. And so there wasn't a whole lot of reverence. And truly, Christmas was a time for us to see family. But it eventually became an obligation as opposed to something that was joyful. What did you want to express about Christmas as a whole, Christmas season, I guess you should say?
Well, this is probably post-Christmas season I was talking about, and just in January, and that the need to kind of to think about your mental health, especially in this month coming right after the holidays. It is usually I think, statistically or annually, the highest month for suicides every year, because people's overall mental health is at the all-time low for the year. First of all, it's usually cold, and that affects your mental health. And the other thing is that because it's cold, you're not as active. You tend to be trying to stay warm, stay bundled up, and so you're not having enough movement and stuff. You're coming off usually a lot of sugars from the holidays. Everyone's cooking or baking cookies and all kind of desserts. So the sugar will affect your mind also. But then the other thing is kind of a void of nostalgic void. I don't know the right term for this, but it's basically that you're trying to relive your Christmases of your past and trying to regain that feelings that you had when you were a child, recapture the magic of the wonder that you had as a child, and then be left empty with those false expectations of what it is. So that's the other thing that people run across, and that as well. And lastly, credit card debt. Whenever people start seeing the debt pile up, things slow down a little bit. You start getting a little nervous. Everything compiles on top of it. You know, you just get a flurry of negativity in your life, and that it creates a very, very fertile grounds for people to take actions that are not that show despair in some way, trying to skirt around that word that you already used.
So what I see more often than not is that we want to make Christmas a special time, and we go overboard. No, not us personally, but just in general. Let's say that America, the South, whatever you want to generalize on that. And by doing that, it cripples you for the rest of the year. So we build up for those moments, and then it cripples you for the rest of the year. So we have really taken to less gifts and more experiences, family time, cooking, things like that, enjoying it. But obviously, not everybody can do that with different work schedules and stuff like that. I think the key on that is not creating a life that you're miserable with after the fact, and also not pretending to have a life that you have during. And I think that's where the challenge becomes. Over the past 30 years, 20 years in particular, I think that our generation before, we have a bad habit of spoiling our kids and taking away all of the ease, or taking away all the difficulties, and making things just so wonderful for them, and it creates that environment that's not sustainable. I think that's what it comes down to, and I can easily see how that would create depression on the backside. My mom probably doesn't watch this, but I did not have the greatest Christmases, but my mom worked her tail off to do as good as she could on that side. But there was always some sort of drama. There was always something going on, whether it was my mom and dad who were divorced, either trying to one-up each other or do something. And I saw that. I saw through, this is a gift, but I'm not going to take advantage of mom or dad and say, I want something bigger. I want something bigger. I saw who was trying to buy me off. I saw who was there day to day and cared about me and loved me. I also saw, I retrospect, I saw the weaknesses of my mom and my dad, and I understand the humanity of them at 37 years old. most people don't start seeing that, and I would say until their 30s, that their parents are actually humans, and the things that they did to hurt you or didn't do that hurt you probably wasn't intentional, and that they were doing the thing that they knew that was best at that time, or they were just trying to survive and trying to make sure that you had food or whatever the case might be. That was a little bit of a rant, but I can definitely see what you're talking about as far as the mental health side. I struggle with discussing mental health. I don't really know what that means. Maybe I need some therapy or something like that to understand the mental toughness. And my thought process has always been, figure it out, suck it up, figure out a way to get through this. Or, there's some poor kid in India, China, Africa that has it way worse than you, so suck it up, buttercup. But I have not addressed some of the issues that I have because of that. And I can understand both pieces of that. What I've done has worked for me, I feel like. I would like to live a more happy and fulfilled life just like everybody else, but I struggle with the woe is me when we live in the greatest country on earth, at the greatest time on earth, with the most wealth on earth, and we're upset because we didn't provide in a certain way or do a certain thing. The expectations, when you carry other people's expectations, it weighs you down and you'll never truly be happy. I do the best that I can at everything that I do, and at that point I have to leave that. I have to set it down. If it wasn't good enough, it wasn't good enough. I'm not with the right crowd. I'm not doing the right thing in my life. I need to change whatever situation I'm in. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I do think that having that kind of mental toughness does take you a lot farther.
And it may be immaturity in some ways too. Like a lot of people are more sensitive to things and they can pick up on things. I feel like I see in more black and white and less in colors, if that makes sense, in the emotional realm. And I can accept the fact that I'm limited in things.
Yeah, I know. And I think overall, though, is having that mental toughness, that mental tenacity overall leads to a more productive mindset, or productive life in general, because you have the ability to roll with the punches.
Sure.
And you're less susceptible to depression. You're less susceptible to things that really get you down. I think when the flip side of it all is that it doesn't make you as receptive. And don't know if this works for you, but I do think it makes people less receptive to the other side of it all, for the emotion, the roller coaster of emotions going up and down, to where, you can't truly experience the highs without really experiencing the lows, because you don't really allow yourself for that. Now, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I don't know, because I'm on that emotional roller coaster all the time.
What I'm saying is the highs and lows. What I was referencing was the blacks and whites and the colors.
Yeah, right.
Same.
Exactly.
And so I think that's important to have some self-awareness. And it's something that I want to grow in as a person. Like I've been really digging into my faith, and also digging into other world religions and faiths and perspectives, Eastern views on things versus Western views. Like I had sent a text message to my friend Bipin Prasad today, and we were talking about a book called Inner Engineering it's an Eastern yogi. I can't say his name. I don't know how to speak Indian, or he's got an interesting name. But basically he's a yogi or a teacher in the East. And I basically said it's a different perspective for me, because I'm used to rugged individualism and not necessarily being in tune with the world, being in tune with nature, being in tune with the aura that's going on. But I do like understanding it in my mind, and hopefully that translates into understanding in other ways. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, 100%.
But Dom, we got to cut it a little bit short. I've got to get to a meeting in about 10 minutes. I'm going to write these down for some stuff that we can work on. I want to go over the tribe of mentors. I want to go over some redundancy, going back to building out redundancy in your business, and how that can be effective. Even though it's not efficient, it allows for transitions and better workflow when emergencies happen, things like that. I want to go over Wild at Heart more. I love the concepts in that book. I've got to reread it. Cutting ties, or at what point does your loyalty stop and then reality begins? Some things I want to discuss on that. We talked about addiction a good bit. What other things do you think we need to flesh out on our next episode or next couple episodes?
And that's a lot right there. I mean, you just said Wild at Heart, and I'm just like, I was like, oh, that's enough to cover about 50.
Well, guys, we appreciate you tuning in on our YouTube. We hope you guys check us out on WKWL as well. Please like, please subscribe, share. If you know somebody that might get some good out of this, share. If you know somebody that might get a good laugh out of it, share. That's fine with us. We want to add value to their lives. We want to help good people get to a better place. Anything else you got, Dominic?
No, that we're good.
All right, you guys have a great day.